I'm not seeing how I can record this. Okay, so we are live. To those who are watching, this is the coming out panel discussion. It's hosted by my church, the One Rule Church. For those who don't know, I'm Cara. I'll give everybody else a chance to introduce themselves in a second. But short version of why we're doing this. I have seen a lot of conversations about people leaving church, but those conversations are being had by people who are still in church or who maybe left church for a time and came back. But I don't know that if there are conversations, I have not seen them. So I don't think that there are enough conversations being had by people who have left or who are in the process of leaving or figuring it out and who don't necessarily have plans of going back. And I also think that there's a lot of misconceptions about what leaving church looks like. I think that there's this idea that if you leave church or organized religion, that you're walking away from God. I think a lot of people, if not most people who have walked away, would disagree with that sentiment. And so I know that there are probably questions just about what it looks like on the other side of things. What does spirituality and relationship with God look like if you don't have necessarily support from a community or a traditional community? And so we are going to talk about those things today. So if everybody could briefly just kind of introduce yourself, if you have any relevant educational background, by all means share that. And then we'll get started.
Well, okay, I'll go first. Okay, so my name is Cherie. I also go by Inkira the Love Guru. I don't think that I have any quote unquote relevant educational background. Not as it pertains to spirituality. I have left the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It has been, let's see, almost 10 years since I've been gone. And yeah, I guess we'll talk more about that as we go along.
Thank you, Cherie. Ashley, you want to go next?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Ashley McBride Braswell. I don't have any relevant educational history, but I will say that I'm a PK kid. So I grew up in the church. My family has a church. My mom is an apostle. My sister is a youth minister. So I am like, quote unquote, the church kid. Like I grew up in it. I know it front to back. Like I was there before the old churchy thing. And when I was a baby in my mom's stomach, I was in the church. So here I am. I think I'm on this journey. I haven't quite left, but I'm not all the way in there. I kind of pick and choose when I go. But it is a journey because I feel like the doctrine just doesn't serve me anymore. But my relationship with God and my relationship with Jesus always serves me. So.
Hello, my name is Chanel Lespierre. I'm from Miami. I don't really have any spiritual education. I went to church school and I went to Oakwood College. So I was in a private school or Seventh-day Adventist school from first grade until I graduated from Oakwood. How I spiritually identify. So I don't identify as a Seventh-day Adventist anymore. The doctrine, like actually said, does not serve me. It does not fit my ideals with how I'm trying to live my life. And it doesn't serve me. So I'm more of a cultural Adventist. I still go to church on Saturday and I sing with the praise team. And sometimes I am active in church, but as of like actually saying that I'm a Seventh-day Adventist, no. I'm just a womanist Christian that goes to church on the Sabbath.
Thank you. And Leah?
Well, I'm Leah Deshay. My last name, for anybody who's SDA, oftentimes speaks for itself. I'm from a 5th generation pastoral family in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Pictures up at Andrews and Oakwood and all of the rest of that stuff in the hallways sort of deal. But from my early years, I really struggled with the lack of rationale with a lot of the doctrine that did not follow anything that was biblical. And like, let's not even get into the fact that I don't believe in the Bible being literal, like just off of the doctrine itself. Even if I were to believe that the Bible was literal, like the doctrine still didn't line up with itself. It's always bothered me. In terms of relevant background, it depends on how you look at it. I've got a couple degrees. One is psych. The one I'm doing right now is sociology. I have spent a lot of my work doing research with women that involves sex and disease, and the intersection with that is almost always religion, especially when it comes to family and domestic violence. It's a constant factor in those issues. So I'm not Seventh-day Adventist. I don't even identify as Christian, which is extraordinarily disturbing to the vast majority of my family. And it's not because I don't believe in Jesus. It's because I don't believe in institutionalizing whiteness as a form of religion. So I am extremely loud about it. Car's smiling because she knows. And I don't believe Christianity represents the gospel. And I also don't believe that it was created to, from an imperialist standpoint. And so I have no problem telling people that I believe in Jesus. And what was the term that I used that somebody took it and ran with?
Gospelist.
Gospelist. I'm a
Yes.
gospelist. I believe in the gospel. I do not believe in the Christian church. I think Christianity is like politics, and I think it's supposed to be. And I think the reason why it's interwoven together is because it is literally just a portion of the power that's been yielded by, imperial forces to keep people under their thumbs. And if that wasn't the case, then we wouldn't have the indigenous impact history that we do worldwide. We can just concentrate on our own diaspora. So I'm super loud. I'm all the way on the left end.
Can I say something about Leah? Leah, I was having this conversation with my sister today about how whiteness has been tied to Christianity.
Yeah.
And the ideology of whiteness is so steeped into the church, because what most people don't understand is the church and even the denominations that flow from it are just an offshoot of those who didn't agree with Catholicism, which was tied into the Roman, which is European identity and ideology. I was having that conversation today. So when you said that, I was like, this is a word. And I would say, and I work in politics too, and I would say it was interesting. It was the more I got into law school and the more I steeped myself into politics is the reason why I started changing a lot of my beliefs and my feelings, because I realized the rhetoric that I grew up listening to and the rhetoric that I believed in the church was the same rhetoric that was used to oppress me as a Black woman. And that really kind of started doing light bulbs in my head about the things that I believed in the rhetoric. And I realized the way that I'm feeling about homosexuals or transgenderism, or the way that I'm feeling about non-Christians, is the exact same way that white people use to categorize and demean and dehumanize Black people.
Right.
And when that happened for me, it just kind of started breaking down.
I just think Christianity is a cloak of idolatry for imperialism. I think it's always been a farce. And people are super duper disturbed when I point that out. But they also are incapable of opposing me in any logical way. Like, nobody who's ever read any books on the matter can tell me otherwise. There is no evidence to the contrary. But that gets more into the fact that Black identity, as I love how Kara put this, is trauma bonded. And a lot of us hear that and we find it very disturbing because a lot of people don't know who they are if we look at the origins of our own adaptation, which is wonderful. And, we've made it work for us in the best possible way. But that doesn't mean that it came out as something that we should celebrate. Like, we should investigate, perhaps, the origin of why do we all consider ourselves one identity? Like, from an indigenous standpoint in Africa, people identify themselves by their tribes. The reason why we have forged together the way that we have is because we had no choice and it was for survival. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I do think it's worth investigating. Like, if there's so much fear around someone dissecting who you think you are as a Black person from a religion that defines you based on whiteness, maybe you should look at that. Like,
Right, I agree 100%.
one little
And
second, think about
we're
that.
actually, so for people watching, we're actually going to do a panel discussion in 2 weeks about that specific topic, because I just did a YouTube series about it. I definitely think it deserves further investigation and conversation, especially because I don't think that most people are even thinking about it that way, and understandably so, because they're not supposed to. So yeah, I want to try to stay focused. We can, like, if anyone who knows us knows that we can talk about a number of topics for days and days and days. But I do want to point out one thing. The reason why I brought up educational background is because of what Ashley said. She is a lawyer. She didn't say that, but she is. And I went to law school. And just like law school for her kind of changed her perspective, the same thing happened for me. And I'm not going to get too into it, but I think Leah's background in psychology and sociology has definitely had an impact. If Cherie and Chanel want to get, I know Sherelle has a book list that's miles long that I definitely want us to dig into at some point as well. Just, even if it's self-education, taking the time to just really be intentional about what you believe and why, and if outside sources outside of the church, whatever they may be, encouraged you down that line, like, I think that that's important, and it's okay to talk about it. So I think we've all kind of touched a little bit on why we left church.
Well, I haven't really said why I left. I didn't
Oh,
know
okay.
doing that yet.
So
I was
for those-
just trying to introduce myself. but-
right. So for those who haven't, Cherie, you can, I guess, get us started. I think Leah kind of mentioned it a little bit. I don't know I think Chanel said that where she's at. So Ashley, I don't know if you said where you're at yet. And I haven't. So we can just kind of do that really quickly.
So for me, I didn't actually grow up Seventh-day Adventist. So there's that. I'm actually a kid that came in through the Revelation Seminar. And they created and cultivated a church here in St. Louis. And I was one of many of the founding members of said church that was created. And so I grew up non-denominational Christian. And in middle school, we became Seventh-day Adventists due to the Revelation Seminar. Now, one of the main reasons why I chose to become Adventist was its heavy emphasis on truth and standing in alliance with the word. So, to my wonderful surprise, upon attending Oakwood University and learning more about Adventism as a whole, and seeing how people live an Adventist life and how that pairs along with what I personally know about Christianity and how I believe we should treat one another, it became very difficult for me to continue to stay in alignment with that. So I do echo and agree with a lot of what Ashley and Leah has said as far as when it comes to research kind of debunking or making it difficult for you to align with that. But so research was a big proponent for me, but also meeting people who weren't Adventists, having relationships with people who are not Adventists was a big source of me deciding that this is probably not the best walk for my spiritual growth and where I need to go, just because of my understanding of the Most High and how we should treat one another. Um, I find it very difficult to be in alignment with the Most High and be in alignment with Adventism at the same time, just because there is such a heavy hand and a heavy stronghold over if you're not this way, then you must burn in hell, or something like that along those lines. So I know several people who are not Adventists. I have friends and people that I love from all different walks of life, different avenues of life. And so it's difficult for me to look at someone that I love, my grandmother or something like that, and say, oh, they're going to burn because they don't believe in the teachings of Ellen G. White. So along with that, and then along with asking pertinent questions, along like as I discovered things that didn't quite add up, me asking scholars and leaders in the Adventist faith questions to get clarity about things, the anger that I have been met with for questioning things just doesn't seem like it aligns with the things that we're saying that we believe in. So I don't know. So a lot of that played a large role in me deciding that maybe I need to seek a different avenue and a different path for my spiritual development. So I just want to make sure that I said that, because I know it's assumed that we all leave for the same reasons, and I don't think that mine is necessarily the same. I don't think anyone's is necessarily the same, but I think that it's important for people who are listening to understand that we all have different reasons, just like we all have different reasons as to why we come into the faith. We have different reasons why we decide this is no longer for us, or it's no longer for us in a certain capacity any longer anymore. So,
Before we moved on, someone asked who is the Most High. So if you want to, say who the Most High is to you really quick, Sheree.
And so let's make this very clear. We all have our own spiritual walks. There is no quote unquote right or wrong. So who I how I speak on my spirituality is for me, because my spiritual walk is for me and it's not for no one else. I'm very private about my spirituality and my spiritual walk because of that purpose. The Most High is the Most High. It's God, the All, the Creator of everything. So my relationship with the Most High and God is tailored to my relationship with the Most High. And there's no one outside of me and the Most High that can determine how that relationship is supposed to go. I don't care who you are, because it's important for us to cultivate and create our own spiritual relationships. That's the whole point of us moving from milk to meat, according to several pastors. So so the Most High is the divine all one, whatever you want to call it, goes by many names. That's one of the names that I like to use, is the Most High, for several reasons. And I think you alluded to it earlier, some gender things and several other things, but for several reasons, I go with terms that resonate with me in the moment, and that's one of them.
And I think it's important to understand that, if you believe that God is this infinite, all power, supernatural, whatever, you can't put finite limitations on infinity. It's antithetical. And so I think anyone anywhere who believes in a higher power, I think whatever people call it, I think we're all more or less referencing the same entity. And so I I think it's what Cherie said, that it's really just a personal, like for me, I use God. I generally try not to gender God. Um, and so I'll say like God, God's self, stuff like that, because it, like, yeah, that's me. And so I think it really does depend on who you're asking. But thank you, Cherie, for clarifying that.
Yes,
Sure, no.
yes. And sometimes I will say universe and stuff too. So just to give everybody heads up, I might interchange some things, but
Right.
yeah.
So Chanel,
Oh, I didn't hear the question.
now I was gonna say if you wanted to talk about leaving. I
Oh, yeah.
thought you thought
So I'm a third generation Seventh Day Adventist. I went, like I said before, I went to elementary school, middle school, high school, Oakwood, all Seventh Day Adventist schools. And I was pretty like gung ho Seventh Day Adventist girl. Like I went to all of the camps. I did True Love Waits. I did like choir trips. I didn't really do Pathfinders too much. That was my sister, but I was very, very, very involved in the church. Like that was my life. In regards to my parents, they are they are very pious Seventh Day Adventists. My mother is no longer living, but she was really into the church. She made sure that we went to every program. We ushered. We used to sing in the choir. We did in gathering. Like we were really deep into it. My dad still practices um, Seventh Day Adventism. He's the most pious Seventh Day Adventist man I've ever met. But I love him. I don't blame my parents. I'm not bitter towards them about them raising me in this church. It was their choice to kind of help fortify me and build up my, I guess, relationship with God. So I want to say, when I was in grad school, I was in an environment that wasn't very nice. I really tried to go to different Seventh Day Adventist churches. They weren't nice or welcoming like the churches down in the South and in Huntsville. So I really wasn't used to that. I also was kind of in a depressed state. I was just it was grad school was a lot. So I think this was in 2013. So my mother got sick and I had to come home, and me and my sister had, to do some things to kind of help her. So unfortunately, she passed away from pancreatic cancer, and then around the same time, um, I ended up leaving grad school, and I had something else personally that happened. So it was very traumatic. My life basically was shattered immediately because my mother was just like, she was everything. So I had to start basically from the bottom up, building up my spirituality. So I'm going to church, and I'm going to church. I'm like, these messages are not really hitting like they used to. So I identify as a womanist or a Black feminist, and I joined a online, I guess, hush harbor or discussion group that is called Unfit Christian, and it talked about womanist theology. So I looked up womanist theology, and I was like, oh, this sounds great, because it's basically my experience as a Black woman being centered, and then then comes Christianity, and I'm just like, this is wonderful because I don't really see myself represented in the Seventh Day Adventist Church. Like I didn't really see myself being represented. Three things kind of drove me, or maybe rather two things kind of drove me to not identify. It's because the number one is that the Seventh Day Adventists would not ordain women. That is a really, really, really big problem for me, because we're both, if both women and men are going to school, doing the field work, getting their degrees, they should both be ordained. I know some women are being ordained right now, but it's still a lot of sexism in the church. And then recently there was a lot of sexual misconduct, purity culture, how they treat the LGBTQIA community. I consider myself an ally now, and whatever they're teaching in Adventist churches does not align with what I believe in. I believe people when people say who they are, you should respect it. And you should not judge them. You have no room to do that. So pretty much, and I just did not, none of the sermons really spoke to me. And in those books, like reading those books about womanist theology, I found a bridge to my mom, who wasn't really vocal about how she grew up and everything, but just reading those books, Black feminism books, Bell Hooks, Jacqueline Wright, Will Gaffney, it really, really helps me. So that's why I say I'm more of a womanist Christian who who goes to church on the Sabbath. I call God she, or non-binary God, and I usually just call Jesus Christ, or Yeshua, which is the Jewish name of Jesus, or I call the Holy Spirit she. And usually when I pray now, even though my dad looks at me kind of sideways, I usually say, "Dear Trinity," or "Dear Holy Spirit," or "Dear God." I try not to say "Our Father" anymore, because I don't really see God as a father. I see him either as non-binary or womanish, I guess. So
No, I get that. So for context, we prayed before we started, and I said, "Dear Heavenly Father," even though I know you don't have a gender. And for me, like the short version, I really do understand how difficult it is to get away from things that you've been doing forever. I'm born and raised Adventist, like Chanel and Leah, super, deep into it. Like I didn't have no activities or nothing outside of church. It wasn't church school. It was Pathfinders, which for those who don't know is like Boy and Girl Scouts, but in church. And then I went to Oakwood, the same as Cherie and Chanel. And there's some stuff that just sticks. Like I've been calling God Heavenly Father for as long as I can remember, probably since I could talk. And so like just it's force of habit. That's what happens. But I think the intentionality that I find outside of church is what draws me the most. People who are being intentional about, kind of overcoming, maybe the little things don't matter. Like maybe it's not that big of a deal to call God Heavenly Father, even though like infinity can't have a gender. But so maybe that's not that big of a deal, but the stuff that matters, I appreciate people who choose to be intentional about it. And I was on a panel last year about why people unplug from church, and I was asked like, what's your biggest issue with the church? If you had to sum it all up, what's your biggest problem? And I think I said two things, but the one I remember is just the profound lack of self-awareness. This idea that it's even possible for one person or one group of people to have an exhaustive absolute understanding of infinity that is somehow better or more valid or more informed than the next person. It's antithetical. And it was going to law school and kind of just understanding how much there is that you don't know. Like one of my professors called it the fog. Like he's like, lawyers are navigating the fog. Like you're getting paid to think for people who don't know how to navigate the fog. And we barely knew how to navigate the fog. So it was just like this is crazy. It was just like it was mental gymnastics every single day. And realizing that law it's not about right or wrong. People are mistaken. It's not. It's about you have a client or you have an angle and you're making arguments in favor of the position that you are being paid to defend. Period. There is no right or wrong. It's who's your client. I got to argue this angle, as far as I can take it. So once I realized that anyone can make an argument for just about anything, the question stopped being, is there evidence in support of something? The question started being, what is the evidence in support of something? And does it hold up against scrutiny? Because anybody can build a wall of information or a wall of evidence, but how does that wall hold up once people start poking holes? Is it, a brick wall that's only missing a few pieces, or is it a Jenga tower that you can just topple over? And so for me, Adventism at its core is a Jenga tower. And maybe, you know, I don't even know that people, especially our age, even know the full history behind Adventism and its formation and what it was intended to do. And so I think that that's a problem. I think if you believe anything, whatever you believe, I think that you need to be extremely intentional about it, because your belief system dictates every other aspect of your life. And so if you're not intentional about how you think and why you think the way that you do in determining what you think about something, then I think you're just across the board doing yourself a disservice. But if you do have an understanding of what Adventism specifically is and where it comes from and how it was formed, I don't understand how you call that absolute truth. I can understand that there's an argument for it. I don't think it's a very strong argument personally, but I don't understand how you know all of those facts and call it absolute. If nothing else, there's reasonable doubt, in my opinion. And so, kind of this idea that if you walk away from the church or the denomination, especially if you're walking away after gaining a knowledge of it, right? Because people who are outside Adventism, who never know anything about Adventism, it's the idea is that they're only held accountable for what they know. But if you know about it and then you walk away from it, like you're rejecting absolute truth, and God is not with you. And so the fact that people feel justified in even taking that posture, for me, is enough to be like, I can't, because I believe what I believe, but I need room to be able to sit with my uncertainty and be at peace with it. I need room to be able to say I know that there is an innumerable amount of things that I don't know that are not possible for me to know. And I have to be okay with that. And I can't surround myself with people who don't have that understanding and need to be right about something that's inherently intangible. Like I need, if I'm going to have community, I need it to be with people who understand that the very best we can do is believe and grow and evolve in our understanding of truth. Because we can say that truth is absolute. Because Jesus said, the way I view it is, Jesus said that he was the way, the truth, and the life. If Jesus is the truth, and Jesus is God or God-like or whatever, Jesus is divine, that means that truth, if it's not infinite in itself, it's divine and probably wholly beyond my understanding, or beyond my ability to fully understand it. And it would take more time than I have in this life and anything that may be beyond it to fully wrap my mind around it. And so the best that I can do is grow in my ability to understand, and you can't do that if you aren't cognizant of your own limitations. And I feel like people who try to ground themselves in intangibles and say that it's absolute, for me, it just sounds like being insecure with accepting uncertainty and accepting your limitations. And from a community aspect, that doesn't work for me. But I will say that I did not have to leave my community. I did my immediate family, almost as soon as I started my journey out, my family started journeying with me. And because my dad was more or less pastoring our home church, he was like learning and I was learning. And so we were both preaching and sharing what we were learning. And our congregation just kind of came with us. And it was never the intention, or not never, but like the intention was not to so much leave Adventism as much as it was to just do what we were doing and wait for ourselves to get kicked out. But that is not how it went down. And I'm not going to put anybody on blast, but it was janky. And so like our coming out as a community, as a church community, was janky. or the circumstances surrounding it on the institution side was janky. And we wanted to stay together. And so the only way to do that was to create our own community. And what's funny is that there are people who are Adventists, there are people who are Christian, there are people like me and my dad who are neither, who all attend church together. And it's not a thing. We don't all see eye to eye. We disagree. But if law school taught me nothing else, it's that people who don't see things exactly the same way can come together and disagree. But it can be thoughtful, it can be respectful, and everybody involved can walk away with a heightened level of perspective, even if we don't walk away with a consensus, if that makes sense. Like we're still all better for the conversation, even if at the end of it we don't agree. So yeah, that's my spiel.
I just
Felicia,
I wanted to say one tiny thing before.
go ahead.
Just the whole notion of a human being, which we all are, having the authority to kick another person out of their connection to God has always been insane to me. And I think that's when I was saying earlier, meeting other people and having connections with people who do not share the same beliefs as me, and how the Adventist church treats people who think just a tiny bit differently is just so insane to me, because Christianity is supposed to be built upon the walk of Christ, and Christ walked around with all kinds of people. So I just feel really sad that your family dealt with that. And
well, we didn't get kicked out. We were we were waiting for it to happen.
The fact that that's a thought process.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
And this isn't even just in Adventism, because like I said,
Right.
I grew up multiple different, I was non-denominational. I've experienced different sects of Christianity. And that is something that permeates an organized religion, period. If you don't agree, we're gonna kick you out. And that fear that just flies in the face of the whole God does not give you the spirit of fear type situation. I don't even understand. So, but I just wanted to say that. Go ahead.
Right. So I just wanted to shout out Felicia really quick. She said that there has to be room to evolve spiritually, and this journey is very personal. I agree 100%. And Layla Green was agreeing with you, Cherie. So I the intention was not to spend this much time talking about that particular portion. However, I feel like we all had things we need to get off of our chest, and that's what this is for. So, we did it. But I do have. Oh, go ahead, Chanel.
No, I just wanted to say quickly. I like what you said about maybe you and your family having different ideologies or thoughts out of different than Adventism, but you didn't leave your community. So I still attend my home church in Miami. They have been the most supportive church ever. When my mother died, when I tell you they supported me and my family, they truly showed me what real Christianity is about. So just for that fact alone, and just, because my mother's of the church, they're still there. I grew up with a few friends there. I'm still there because it's like home to me. I may not like the organization or the conference, but I love my home church. So I'll always attend there, no matter what. That's my church. Now, outside of that, no.
And I think that that's really important, like to understand about people who either have issues with the institution and don't claim it, but still will like associate themselves with certain aspects of it. Because one, I think it's extremely difficult to just get away 100%. But I also think that I think my takeaway is that community is and should be separate from ideology. you should be able to have access to the love and the support and the encouragement of the community without feeling the need to conform spiritually to what someone else has decided is the truth. And I think for me, from an institutional level, I did not feel that that was possible within Adventism. And so, you know, for me, me and my family took it upon ourselves to just create our own space. But what I wanted to get into was how walking away felt, you know, because I feel like we talk about the why a lot, but we don't talk about you know, what goes into it. Because I think the misconception is that people walk away from church either because they just want to do their own thing and they don't want to be held accountable, you know, by people in church. And they, you know, it's like, we're not judging you, it's righteous judgment, and you just don't want somebody to tell you, you know, about yourself. Or it's like, I guess you're wanting to find truth elsewhere and you're not going to be able to do that. And so I think that trivializes the experience and the emotions that go into it. I don't think there's anyone on this panel specifically who would say that walking away was easy or that it was not a decision that, you know, you have struggled with. And you know, you're maybe in some ways still trying to figure it out and decide what you're going to do. And so if you guys can just, you know, talk a little bit about that to whatever extent you feel comfortable. I know that's kind of a vulnerable space to kind of dig into, but you know, I don't know if Leah, maybe you want to start and then Ash can go around.
Yeah, I would love to start. You know, hindsight is 2020. So especially for somebody who left 9 years ago, I think it is important to realize that the place at which I'm saying this from makes a difference. Do you know what I mean? Versus how people feel while they're leaving. Perspective, once you're gone, can sometimes completely change your reflection on what was going on at the time. Ironically, my leaving, it was much harder for me to stay than it was for me to go. Because the experience that I was having was so caustic, and so isolating isn't the right word. I think if I had been isolated, I probably would have remained in the church because I'm pretty introverted and I don't respond to isolation the way that a lot of other people do, you know, for completely valid reasons. It's just my personality. People were accosting me socially because in my situation, I left because I was in an extremely unsafe marriage and I didn't have any support. And there were people who were extremely aware of what was going on. Now I found out were aware of this person's tendencies and proclivities before we got married and chose not to tell me, which I experienced as additional violence, and most women do. And then were pressuring me to like pray and stay. And so it sort of became a parallel experience of me. It was becoming much more difficult to stay in the household in that marriage than it was for.
Oh no, we lost Leah, I think.
I think she's on a pause, but while she's
There we go.
she's
People's
back.
response to perceiving that there were issues was also the same to like trying to make me stay in a situation that was going to destroy me, more or less. What are we doing here? Sorry, my Wi-Fi is being really weird. I don't know if you guys can still see me, but somebody says literal
We can
tears.
see you.
Can you still? I don't know. It doesn't matter.
Your
Yeah,
your video is frozen, but we can hear you.
And I was like, oh, this is part of the church doctrine to treat women like trash. I can't stay here. And I started to realize that like half of the reasons that I had gotten into such a terrible relationship is because I had been coached, like for lack of a better word. In the sense of when you grow up in a cult-like environment, there are so
Yeah.
many activities and and attitudes and behaviors that are normalized for you that are terrible, and they're normalized specifically so that you don't feel comfortable leaving a circumstance that you probably shouldn't be in the first place. So when I realized that the reason why I was having trouble leaving my marriage was because I had been coached my entire life to just swallow, oppression and mistreatment as a Black woman in the church.
Oh no, we lost her. Well, while we wait for her to come back, Ashley. Oh, go ahead,
Can I say
Sheree.
something really quickly?
Mhm.
So, along the lines of what Leah is saying, I actually had very similar experience in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. I have been married and divorced. A lot of people in the Seventh-day Adventist Church know nothing about that, and that played a large part of it. And what she's saying, and I see some people in the audience are saying as well, that is a very real situation. That is a very real thing. There's a very real you're going to burn in hell if you get a divorce. If you don't stay, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. There's a very real um, uh, uh, pressure that is placed on you. So I'm echoing everything that she's saying right now, because that is a real situation. It happens more than it doesn't happen in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. It happened to me too. So I'm going to yield back to Leah since she's back now. But yeah.
Hi, sorry. I had to move to the main router in my room because it's decided now that it doesn't want to cooperate with me, of course. I must be saying something important. But yeah, I don't know where I left off, but I was basically saying, once I realized that the reasons why I had so much depression and loss of self-worth and despair over the idea of leaving a marriage that really was killing me, literally and figuratively, um, was because I had been trained more or less to tolerate mistreatment in a church that tells women that, like, this is part of your burden to bear for existing. like this is part of the cross you bear to get into the kingdom. And I just got to the point of, like, what kind of kingdom is this, and why should I want to go into it if it involves, like, my suffering as a sacrifice? That doesn't sound like love to me. And the problem is that mindset is also put into your brain in relationships, in your marriage, with your partner. It's psychotic. It really, really is. And there's so many, like, to depersonalize it from my own experience, it represents many people's experiences. You can see it everywhere. Like, the degree to which the conference, people are going to get angry with me for this, I don't care at all. There's a reason why I left. But as a church kid, as a granddaughter of a conference leader and a chaplain of Oakwood, and my dad being an interim pastor and all of those other things, the level of corruption and abuse and absolute disgusting behavior that happens behind closed doors that people refuse to acknowledge. They will literally throw every single victim, especially if they're women, under any and every bus that they can find in order to maintain the projected image that they're putting forth to justify their own existence. I just refuse ever at any point in my life to be associated with an organization that seeks to exist that way. And, like, that, once I pulled back from it and I did separate, first of all, that was the best Sabbath of my life. That first Sabbath where I took that step, and, like, I say Sabbath because I still treat it as, like, my day with God. I do not do it the way that I ever did when I was Seventh-day Adventist. I went to the beach. I had lunch with friends. I sat around and listened to my favorite music. It was just beautiful. But I cried because I was like, oh, this is what it's like to spend time with God. I didn't know, because I was surrounded by so many crazy people for the last 25 years of my life. I couldn't even get close enough to God to know what it felt like to actually have an edifying, meditative, experience of being able to think about myself and my own walk introspectively. And once you do that with God, you know, he draws you into himself, and then he draws you towards everybody else in a spirit of service. Like that's the loop. That's the Mobius strip of love, more or less. That's how it works. But when you're in the church, you can't get there because you're so busy either trying to escape trauma or bury trauma that people won't let you deal with, or run away from everybody else who will not face their own trauma. It is just like a sewer experience socially. Like, it sounds terrible, but that's for real. So I don't know. That's my response to the question. And contrary to popular belief, I will. One of my kids is up, so I'm gonna go unmute after this for a minute, and she'll probably be on. But contrary to popular belief, it's once you leave, it will be so hard for you to go back. And I think it's really important to point that out, because everything feels hard while you're doing it, but it's only because you're so afraid of being damned, but nobody's told you how wonderful it feels to be liberated, man. And so as a point of encouragement from somebody who's on the other side of that, I have never been more free. I have never been more close to God. I have never spent so much time being obsessed with service for the planet as I have when I've left the church. So it might feel hard now, but allow yourself the hope to know that this is the hardest part is before you leave. It's not after.
That
So,
was a
that's
whole
me.
word. Whole word.
I'm gonna get my kid and blame you.
That was a whole word. And this is why I love Leah, because like she doesn't mince words and really goes there. Ashley is the one person on this panel who was not born and raised Seventh-day Adventist.
No.
And so, oh, I'm sorry. Cherie was not born and raised Seventh-day Adventist. She converted. Ashley is the only person who has never been Seventh-day Adventist. Let's say
Never.
that. And so I'm really interested to hear what the experience has been outside of, you know, the denomination that we're all familiar with, because I think that that almost gets lost in translation too. And for me, this is why I have a problem with Christendom as opposed to just Adventism, because this is not unique. It's
Mhm.
not, you know, it's, and people say that, I feel like people say it's not unique to say like, you know, it happens everywhere. And so like, you know, we're no worse than anyone else, but it's like, it's not good across the board. None of this is good in any scenario. So yeah, but go ahead, Ashley.
So for me, I grew up Southern Baptist, and then when I came to Michigan, I'm originally from the South. So I'm originally from Virginia, and we were still Baptist, more so like kind of like the full gospel Baptist, more so. And then we converted over to non-denominational, which I was for a very long time. And then somewhere along the way, I kind of began this. We had this church which kind of went on the more Hebraic side. So I did a lot of study into Judaism for years. I celebrated the High Holy Days, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, Passover. So I've come to really understand the Judaic side of who Jesus really was, Yeshua HaMashiach. So I have kind of like all of this weird kind of background, right? I've grown up in the Baptist church, which is a lot more traditional, which in a lot of ways I struggle with now, because I appreciate the foundation that I have, right? I appreciate that I'll wake up in the middle of the night in the morning and my mom is slapping oil on my head before I go to school. You know, I appreciate going to the tarrying service where I had to learn how to tarry and pray, and I fasted. Like, I appreciate all of those things, because when life gets hard, those are the things that I run back to, right? I run back to my spiritual closet. I put my post-it notes on the wall and I pray and I cry and I worship. So it's like all of these foundational things that built me up, I appreciate. And the struggle is like, but how do I get there without subjecting my children and where I am now to the tenements of it? And that's where I really, really struggle. And I want to say it started probably around law school. For me, it was just this disenchantment that I had, and I just couldn't. So I was like, oh, well, maybe. So for a while, my church stopped having service every Sunday, and then we did every other Sunday we did outreach. So we were out in Cass Park feeding the homeless and doing all that, and that really like touched and served my heart. I was making friends in the community and of people that didn't look like me and had all these stories, and we were helping. For a while that like balmed me, right? It was like a balm in Gilead. It was fine. And then somewhere along the way, like that even just wasn't enough. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I'm tired of the Black church, right? So let me go try a multicultural church. And I went there, and then that didn't help because it just was kind of more of the same. And then I just couldn't get rid of the, the guitar. And I'm like, where is the bass? I need that praise and worship. So then I think it was somewhere along the way where I was just like, I don't know why I'm feeling this, but I don't feel connected. I don't feel like this is serving me. And it's a really scary thing to get there because I'm like, I have been with Jesus in the church my whole life. My mom is an ordained apostle. My sister was a PK kid. I sung in the choir. I praise danced, and I did all of that stuff in the church. And then it was like this burden on me that I'm like, am I ever going to be good enough? Like, no matter what I do, I pray, I fast, I can't, and I think really kind of going into my late 20s, I was like, okay, I went on the purity movement because I'm like, okay, well, it's me sinning, like I can't stop sinning. I got to stop having sex before marriage. I can't, I got to be right before God. I can't keep doing these things. So I did all that. And it's still, I was like, because, the whole purity movement it's just like a lot of pressure on women because then the whole purity movement tells me, well, if I do this, I'm going to be rewarded with this good Christian, godly man. And so for me, not having a father and not having the best relationship with my father, and one of the things that I was definitely afraid of is marrying someone where I did not have the family that, I was going to be the single divorced mom and doing all of that to my child. So like, my whole thing was like, I need to like do these things so God will reward me and I will be holy and sin free. And like, I won't go to church and feel condemned. And I got there and like all of these church dudes were the absolute worst. Okay. The worst. And somewhere along the way, I just kind of let it all go. And I started literally praying my husband on a Post-it note, and he came. And marriage for me was really started to be my awakening. And I think it started to be my awakening because I'm 32 for reference, and I'm kind of at this point where I'm really becoming a woman, right? I'm really stepping into my womanhood. And all of these things that now that I'm free to do because I'm married, I still had shame about them. And I couldn't get rid of the shame, right? And then I'm like, darn it, like, what happens to my daughter if she's not married by the time she's 32? What happens if she doesn't get married? Like, what happens to her? Is she never going to be whole as a woman? Is she never going to feel the things that I'm discovering because now I feel free to do them because I'm married and I'm not like having this ultimate sin anymore? Like, that was kind of the manifestation of, and then I'm like, my husband is not, he grew up in the church and all of that stuff. We both have, but he's not like, a deacon. He can like pray for me and we can commune together. And then I'm like, well, is this going to not be what it's supposed to be because he wasn't in the church at that time as well? And we didn't do things the holy or right way, but I'm experienced this love on a greater level that I've never had. The way he loves me and cares for me and is concerned about me, is intentional for me, is everything lining up with the word, but it wasn't presented how the church says it's supposed to go. And so then I felt ashamed. I felt ashamed. I felt scared. I felt like, is the shoe going to drop on me because we're not doing it the way that I've been taught to do it my whole life? And then if it does drop, is it my fault because I did it outside of God? And so, it was just, we lived together before we got married. Like all of these, and our timeline was a little faster than others, but it was like all of these questions I start having, but I'm like, but man, the blessings that is coming from this, like, I don't understand it. So it's that kind of really started the journey for me, because I'm like, as a woman, like all of the things that I have internalized from the church that I'm even still struggling with as a married woman, like this can't be right. And I just didn't want to subject my child to that, my children to that. I'm like, man, I think especially as us being educated Black women, and as having parents that maybe have propelled us in a higher level to start off a little higher than what they started off, we have a lot of hindsight, and we have a lot of area to grow and to do things differently and better than our parents did. And so there is something that I struggle with, because I'm like, man, my mom gave me a beautiful foundation of love and relationship with Jesus. I will say that my mom taught me relationship with God and relationship with Jesus, but it was intermarried with the church. And so for me, that struggle is, and especially like I said, as I've been reading and dissecting, a lot of the beliefs that we have are tied to whiteness and the ideology. And I'm really intentional about deconstructing whiteness in my own life because of the work that I do, and representing my people and representing myself as a Black woman and raising Black children and being married to a Black man. I'm very intentional, and about working for the Black community, I'm very intentional about deconstructing whiteness in my life. And so that's just kind of where I am. And so I literally have conversations with God. And then for a while, a lot of things were happening in my personal life with family members that I was just a little bitter towards God. I was a little bitter. I was a little like, God, my mom is that pious, faithful Christian woman who set a good example, and all of these things that for me were really hard to watch her go through were happening. And I was a little upset with God for a while. Like, God, how can you not reward somebody that's doing the work? So it took me a while to kind of get over that hurt and that bitterness that I had towards God, of not understanding why these things are happening for so long. And then it kind of took me to a place where I had to kind of let go of those doctrines and those things that I was having, because it was having me turn my heart away towards God. Because I grew up, you in the church, you hear so much that if things are going wrong in your life, it's because you're not doing the right thing. It's the test. You're failing the test, or you need to be delivered, or you're not praying hard enough, you're not fasting hard enough. And I'm like, Lord, I'd have been on like fast after fast from my mama and all of these things that were just happening in my life at the time. And I just kind of had to get to the place where I just accepted that it is what it is, and all things will work for my good. And so that's just kind of where I am right now. And as a woman, I have 2 stepchildren. As I'm, on a journey of motherhood myself, it's just, I'm kind of, at this place where I'm like, I want to give my children the best that I have to give them, but without them having to unpack and go to therapy and do all the work. Because the reality is, a lot of churches are very cult-like. And once you leave, you're like, And then once I left, and I found out again that a lot of the ideology that I believed, a lot of it comes from right-wing evangelical Christians who don't like Black people. I was just like, especially in like working in politics, when I realized like some of the things that I was being taught verbatim was coming from right-wing evangelical Christians who were pro-Republicans and pro-lifers, but don't believe in Black lives, and are pro-life, but they don't care about people when they need social services, and they don't care about the mother after they have the child. Then like I couldn't do it anymore. I just really couldn't do it anymore. And so, that's where that's kind of where I am, that I've come to the place where I don't know all. All I do know is that God is real, prayer works, Jesus is my rock, and he has delivered me. And that if I live my life in service to him, and if I live my life in service towards other people, then all things will work to my good. Because I can't say I love God and hate you. I can't say I love God and want to condemn you. I can't say I love God and I don't give you the same grace that he gives you every day. So like that's the point. That's kind of where I've gotten. So like all of these other things, I tell me and my mom get into whole conversations about this. And I'm like, Mom, I don't know anymore. All I do know is that I'm gonna pray. I understand that the word is real and that these universal principles of God work in my life. And that's all I have, because I ain't got a heaven or hell to put you in, and I ain't made it in yet. So I can't say if you gonna get there. I'm trying to make it in. Okay. And so I think that if we all really, especially in Christendom, if we all just got to the point where we say, I'm just trying to make it in, and I don't want to be your stumbling block. I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to condemn and judge you. I'm just trying to love you so that I can make it in. Then I think we will all be, a little better off in this world. Because I sincerely take to heart when Jesus says the greatest commandments are to love God with your whole heart and then to love your neighbor as yourself. And if we really just focused on those two things, the doctrine wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter.
Girl.
Ashley just preaching. She just took us to church real quick. Woo!
Yeah. I want to speak to the being bitter towards God. So as I stated before, my mom was probably the most pious Seventh-day Adventist woman. She was a Sabbath school teacher. She was very supportive of the young people. She supported Christian education to the point where she was working 3 jobs to keep us in there. She would literally give her last to make sure that me and my sister were educated in school, because it was that important to her. Same for my dad, taking extra shifts, doing whatever he needed to do. So when she died, I was very bitter. I was angry because not only did she die of cancer, she died of one of the most deadliest cancers. And I'm like she did. She's not a perfect person, but she really tried to raise her children and be the best mother and wife that she should have been. And she was my rock. She was my everything. And when she was taken away, I'm just like, really, God? And then graduate school not working out, and just the other thing that happened, it just like I literally had nothing. Like I felt like a big zero. And I was dealing with a lot of suicidal ideation. I think that's how you pronounce it. I was struggling. But then, the Lord spoke to me that one day she was just saying, I will always love you, and you still have your family. Don't give up. And my sister and my father, I call them my salvation. I don't worship them, but they save my life every day. There were points where I was not working because I just mentally couldn't handle it. I'm diagnosed with major depression, major anxiety, ADHD. I'm still struggling with that to this day, and they help me just to really move forward. Every time I wanted to hurt myself, I would just think about them, and I'm just like, I just can't do it. And the ultimate thing is that I really want to see my mom again in heaven. So I have to do whatever I have to do to get my mind right, and then be of service, more particularly to Black women, to know that you can make it. I think that's what my purpose is, and that's what I'm working towards, to open up a wellness center and opening up a feminist bookstore, just to I want Black women to be whole. in Jesus Christ or whatever spiritual walk they're in. And I want them to feel accepted and not feel weathered and not feel like they have to be a superwoman. Just be a human being that needs grace and support. And through that really hard time, I was able to find God and I found myself. And I did go, I went to therapy. I am on medication just to help me. I want to be transparent about this just in case anybody else is struggling with, I think it's mental issues. It's probably not the right word to say. Maybe ableist, but sorry. But I'm still working towards being a whole person. It's really difficult. And also the purity culture thing, Ashley, you were talking about, trash. When I tell you my church or the Adventist church in general, like they're so obsessed with it. Like it's amazing. And I want to say that not there are some people in Adventism that really, really help me. Um, there's a pastor by the name of Kimberly Bolgen who has really been helpful with me unpacking a lot of purity culture and like sexual trauma, things of that nature. She really, really helps me to own my femininity and my sexuality and not think that it's wrong. So I really want to thank her publicly because she really like changed my life with her platform. Love God, Love Sex, wonderful platform. We have great discussions and we just unpack all of the church hurt, all of the church drama or trauma, all the sexual things that just don't make sense. And it's a really supportive environment. And also Dr. D Knight, like she also helped me to unpack a lot of stuff because it's it's violent, it's traumatic, like all the stuff that purity culture does to you, suppresses all of your feelings sexually, brainwashes you that you're supposed to be basically a helpmeet to your husband. Then when you get to your wedding night, it's like you're supposed to automatically switch and become little Kim and do all this other stuff, and you can't do that without you telling. I'm like, we need to know before we return to little Kim. We need to know what we need to do and what our mindset needs to be. And they don't teach that. They just tell us, oh, you have sex just to have kids, but they don't teach us that sex is a gift from God to enjoy. So yes, I totally agree with you, Ashley, about the purity culture and being bitter. And now I'm not as bitter. I'm trying to move forward with the purity culture. I don't, I just don't follow it. I'll just leave it at that. And I'm letting the Lord lead me and making the right and healthy decisions for me to be whole.
Okay, for me. So, answering the question, was it difficult to leave the church? Like I told you guys, I officially left the church about 10 years ago. What I didn't tell you guys was it wasn't my first time. I originally started having issues with the Seventh-day Adventist Church around 2007. And I spent between 2007 and 2010, 11 ping-ponging back with the idea of, do I leave? Do I stay? How would that be? Am I gonna burn in hell? Blah blah blah. It took me a while. It wasn't like I'm out of here. You know what I mean? It took me quite a bit of time to make that determination that I was going to go. So if you're someone who's dealing with that, or this is something that you're here for, to hear other people's perspective, know that everyone does not come to this decision overnight. Know that sometimes you may leave and you may come back and you may leave again. You know what I mean? It's each and every person's walk is different. And don't feel like something is wrong with you because you don't know, because none of us do. None of us know. We don't know. We're just out here doing what is best for us as we go along. There is no right or wrong way to do this thing. We're all figuring it out as we go along. So, for me, it was very difficult for several reasons. I think Kara alluded to this, community was a big one. Like I told you guys, I joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church when I was in middle school. So a lot of my peers and who I knew and everyone in my college, because I went to Oakwood University, was a part of Adventism. So not being a part of that kind of alienates you from everything, because that is literally everything that there is in Huntsville. Really, if there's Adventism, or you're gonna burn in hell because you're with the A&M kids. Like, that's just life in Huntsville. And so it's like that extreme. So I did this whole teeter-totter situation. It actually, my decision, and my start of deciding which way that I wanted to go was actually in a response to me trying to have a closer relationship with God. As I went my whole sophomore year at Oakwood, so my from 2005 to 2006, that whole sophomore year of Oakwood, I went on a fast. I went on a fast from everything, a fast from everything that was quote unquote secular. So I didn't listen to music that wasn't gospel. I didn't watch things that wasn't within the confounds of spirituality. I didn't go to parties. I didn't do anything. I was just focusing on developing my relationship with God. And that was my daily prayer each and every day, to be closer to God, to have a stronger bond with God, to feel like how I am portraying myself on the outside, on the inside. So I went through this whole massive fast, this whole massive situation, to where I didn't even have a cell phone. Like, that was how cut off I was, trying to get closer to, because I looked around me and it seemed like everybody had this awesome relationship with God. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, well, I'm just faking it. So I don't know what's going on. I'm just out here winging it, and I need to figure out something. I'm obviously failing, because everybody is so enthralled in the glory. And I'm just like, well, I know what it's supposed to look like, but I know that that's not what it's not resonating on the inside in the same level of capacity. Or if it is, it's not a consistent situation. It's like this on Friday during Sabbath, or on Wednesday. It's not something that I walk with on a day-to-day basis. And I got to the point to where a relationship with God was more important to me than how I looked. And so when I went on that fast, and that was my desire, here come 2007. So 2007 comes along, and God threw me a big curveball that I wasn't expecting. So I was expecting, you think you know how it's going to go, and it really did not go the way that I wanted it to go. I was expecting God just to fill me with the Spirit, and then everything would be fixed. And God was like, walk away. I was like, what are you talking about? What you talking about? What you talking about, God? Let me ask you again. I think you misheard. I wasn't saying, I just kind of want to, get closer to you. You're telling me to leave. That doesn't seem like, well, maybe that's not God. Maybe I'll pray longer. Maybe I'll stay longer. Maybe I'll try something different. Maybe I'll try a different church. Maybe I'll do this. Maybe I'll do that. And I went back and forth with that situation for years. And God kept saying, I am telling you to leave. I am telling you to walk away. I am telling you to walk out on faith. I am telling you to trust that if you leave, you're going to be okay. And that was very, very, very difficult for me. And much like what I think it was you, Cara, or Chanel said, and it might be everyone, I was big time church energy. Like, I was junior pastor, I was pathfinder, I was representing the conference, I was temperance, I was Bible bowl, I was in the drum corps, I was color guard, I was all of it. I was big time energy. I was leaving high school and walking door to door with evangelists, knocking on doors, saving souls. That was me. I was praise and worship. I was in the choir. And when I got to Oakwood, it got no different. I was in literally my freshman year. You can open up the yearbook, and I am in every club, in every picture, trying to do everything that I possibly can for God. I am in M. Canania. I am in miming. I am doing everything. I'm doing everything that I possibly can. I'm giving every inch and every ounce and every bit of effort of my life to serve God. But God was still like, no, nah, cuz walk away. I need you to walk away. And it was difficult for me to do because I felt like I think it was Leah who was saying this. The indoctrination of what I knew spirituality was battling with the reality of the spirituality that I was cultivating with God. And it was like a war that was going on in my mind. You know what I mean? I'm hearing God's voice and I'm literally like, but I don't know, God. See, I don't know if you're right. You know what I mean? I don't know if I should leave. You know what I mean? And it you know, like they say, God comes in mysterious places and mysterious ways, and he will show up to you in the most odd and most craziest situation. And I remember watching Disney's movie, The Life of Pi. I don't know if anybody's ever seen that movie, but pretty good movie. So one thing that stuck out to me about that movie was the main character. He subscribed to a variety of different religions throughout the course of that movie. And he made a statement in the movie and he was like, some things are only meant for you for a season. And the second that he said that, God said in my head, I said, move. And I said, well, it's time to go. And I remember like leaving. I remember being afraid to be around other Adventists or like communicating with them because I knew that I wouldn't be able to explain or, you know, or I felt like I had to explain. Like it was such a weird feeling. It was just such a yuck. It was just such a weird situation to where I felt all this accountability to people who had nothing to do with the relationship that I wanted and that I was trying to create. And one thing that I can say is that after leaving, I feel like I have a stronger relationship with God. I feel like my relationship with God, I feel like after the relationship that I have now with God makes me feel like I never had a relationship with God until now. That's how strong my relationship is. I felt like God was an acquaintance to me before, but now God is a friend to me because I actually wake up every day and literally spend moments of silence and solitude with God. And I don't feel like, oh, you know, I got to do this and it's naturally, it's just a natural thing that I do now. But I wasn't doing that before. I wasn't doing that in church. I was worried about what everybody else was going to think about me. I was worried about looking the part. I was worried about having all the right stuff, fitting in with the Adventism and, you know, being a poor kid, making sure that I got all the stuff that I'm supposed to have. I was worried about everything else than what I needed to worry about. I was becoming more pharisaical and a lot less like Jesus. And so for me, leaving the church meant my salvation, especially when I've read scriptures and I realize in scripture when they say God does not dwell in the temples made by man's hands and things of that nature. God does not, this is church right here. I don't have to be in a building. I don't have to be in an organization. I don't have to be in these particular guidelines in order to be in the favor of God. So once that clicked in my mind, it was easier for me to follow his voice instead of following the echo chambers of organized religion all over the world. So I don't know. So I hope that helps somebody, but it was not hard easy for me. I do hold fast to things that I feel are spiritually sound to me, and that like I think Ashley was saying this, I have a lot of things that are foundational to me. I do still keep the Sabbath, but like Leah say, I keep it in my way. I do still read the Bible, but I also read other spiritual books and I also use other spiritual tools. So I do still believe in God, you know what I mean? But it's just like I have tailored and cultivated my spirituality for what is best for this beautiful walk that God has given to me. And my walk is different than everyone else's. And it's not my place to tell anyone what they should be doing on their walk. But it is my responsibility as a light being to shine a light and show people that you have the right to cultivate your own spirituality, and no one can tell you that you're wrong for doing so. So I'm gonna yield because I don't want, we already on here for, you know, I won't take up too much time, but yeah.
No, that was good, Cherie. And I'm gonna try to just briefly say that it was not easy for me to leave. Adventism was my whole life, and I was not a passive bystander in the church. Like, I knew exactly what Adventism was and exactly why I was Adventist, and I believed in it wholeheartedly. Like, I believed that Jesus was coming soon. I was preparing for the time of trouble, trying to get my mind right and make sure my calling and election was sure. Um, I was in it. And so there was a feeling of just like disillusionment, kind of coming to realize that a lot of that was not, in my opinion, not true. Or yeah, a lot of it, and specifically from the Adventist perspective, was, I don't feel, is true. And it was heartbreaking, and earth shattering in a way, because I spent my whole life relying on the truth of something only to come to the realization that there's errors here. If nothing else, it's flawed. And then my family kind of going through that realization as well. It did a number on us, because I think the question is, and we had kind of talked about this on Clubhouse a couple of weeks ago, and someone had asked, how do you know that you're not wrong? And how do you know that, like, what are your boundaries? How do you set boundaries? Like, what keeps you from falling off the straight and narrow? And it's terrifying to have these boundaries in place that other people have given you, only to realize that some, if not all of those boundaries are baseless. And then because you realize they're baseless, now they're completely gone. And what do I do now? Like, how am I supposed to live my life? How do I make decisions? Like, it was paralyzing in a lot of ways, just trying to figure out what I do with myself and how I'm supposed to live my life outside of the confines of someone else telling me what that's supposed to look like. And I don't think that people who were like on the outside looking in really realize that. I think that when you're going through that process, you can get defensive. You can argue and push back because it's, like, you're trying to figure it out, and having all these outside opinions and all this other stuff going on. Like, you don't want anything to sway you. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to stand on my own 2 feet, but I'm not sturdy yet. And, anything could come along and like push me off my pedestal, and I could be off blowing in the wind, and God knows how I'll recover from that. And so I think people see defensiveness and see the pushback, and don't realize that it is coming from pain and fear, and I'm trying to figure it out. But once I realized that I had to take ownership of who I was outside of the confines of what somebody else had decided was true, and realize that, like, if I don't have somebody else setting these boundaries, then yeah, I'm going to go out. Yeah, I'm going to, have my relationships and do whatever I'm going to do, because I don't have anybody else telling me. And, having to take ownership of that, because like Ashley was saying, like, everybody is telling you all this stuff is wrong, and you feel ashamed and you feel guilty. But I think once I realized that a lot of what other people think and feel is them projecting their fear, and their own uncertainty, and their own need to be right. And I don't have to allow that to dictate what I do and do not do. And while there are some things that absolutely do not work for me, and I had to learn that the hard way, there are things that do work for me that, other people either it doesn't work for them, or they feel like it doesn't work for them. And that has nothing to do with me. Like Ashley was saying, she lived with her husband before they got married. I lived with my husband before I got married, had a kid with my husband before I got married. And my life has been perfectly fine. Like we haven't, I'm a stay-at-home mom. We haven't struggled financially. Like all this bad, like waiting for the shoe to fall. Like I 100%, I'm like, okay, like we didn't do it right. Right. We just did it. And I don't know what's gonna happen. Maybe, God is gonna get me at some point and whatever else, but it just hasn't been the case. And when I first started my journey, and in questioning all of that, I just felt impressed that God, was always gonna have my back. And if I, committed myself to the journey and took it authentically and honestly, um, that he was going to take care of the rest, and that there was internal work that I needed to do in order to become the person that I believe God put me on this planet to be. And I couldn't do that if I wasn't willing to commit to the journey. And it is scary. It's still scary. I still, get anxious and, still am sometimes paralyzed by fear. But what I have now that I didn't have then is the testimony about what I know God has done for me. And there's a song that we would sing at Oakwood. My youth choir used to sing it in high school, and it's nothing to fear, but that we forget what God has done in the past. And I believe that 100%. Like if I know who God has been and how God has shown up for me, then I don't have to be afraid about, circumstances that don't make sense or that seem beyond my control. And I don't have to be afraid of myself. Like I feel like part of the fear too is confronting who you are outside of the boundaries that other people have set, and acknowledging like that was masking some stuff that I don't necessarily like about myself, that I don't necessarily want to deal with about myself. And when you don't have doctrine and rules and all this other stuff to hide behind, and you have to deal, but the reality is that the only way you can fix it is if you deal with it. And that's why I say, like, if your religion, whatever it is, if it's not making you a better person, if it's not forcing you to overcome the things that you don't want to admit about yourself, then I don't even know what it's for, because it's not serving its purpose. And frankly, I don't really care what a person believes, because I know who God has been for me, and I know what I believe about why Jesus came to this earth. And I believe that Jesus came not so beyond, saving people from their sins. I think he came to give us a mirror so that we could see our reflections, our true reflections, and allow God to save us from ourselves. And so if you're not willing to do the work, and your religion enables your unwillingness to do the work, I really just don't see the point in it. And it's not easy. The work is not easy. Confronting who you are and going through the process of changing it, because change doesn't happen overnight. You have to bump your head. You have to deal with, all the stuff that comes with it. It's not easy. But there's nothing about my journey now that I would go back and change, because I don't know that I would have ended up where I am now. And the person that I am now is the best version of myself that I have ever been. And I'm still, growing, evolving. No one's perfect, but you couldn't pay me to go back to being who I was before. I just made the commitment to journeying and being true to myself. So yeah, it wasn't easy. It's still not easy, but I'm stronger and it's worth it. And I have absolutely no regrets. So Leah is going to have to leave us soon. And my husband, Jack, had asked a question about something that I said earlier. So we're going to hit that really quick. And then if we can quickly go through just some of the stuff that we do in terms of our spirituality that does work. Because I think we've all kind of touched on that a little bit. Like you keep the Sabbath, but you do it in your own way and you actually commune with God and experience God. You listen to music. I see Cherie has her sage going over there. A few different people had talked about manifestation and while Ashley was talking. And I think that some of this stuff has like a bad rap because people don't necessarily understand it. And so if you can, just talk a little bit about, what you do that works and how there's cohesiveness in it, right? Like there is no conflict ideologically with all the things that you do. So real quick, Jack had asked, how do you imagine someone gets to enjoy the community of church without fully being involved in the church? And so Leah, you can go, and I have a thought on that.
So I feel like this is my life with Seventh-day Adventism. I am still deeply entrenched in the Seventh-day Adventist community, partially because, like, I don't want to say I can't get out. Like, I could if I felt like it. I don't. Um, all of my friends, I grew up so sequestered, as so many of us do who come from pastoral families, and that's intentional to a certain extent because that's how you perpetuate your children, like inheriting the entire kit and caboodle, right? By making sure they don't have outside contact long enough to form any close bond with anybody who's not Seventh-day Adventist. Like, that's part of the plan and it works well. The encouragement I would have for that is that like, trust your intuition, because I was terrified at a certain point when I was talking about earlier that the most difficult part about leaving is before you leave, not after. This is what I was referring to, and my extraordinary fear of having every single truly solid relationship that I had ever formed in my life pulled out from under me. I was anticipating this really high level of rejection from my own friends. Okay, we're not talking about my family members. We're not talking about my parents who are boomers. We're most definitely talking about, older than them who are a silent generation. That's a completely different conversation that needs to be had. But I feel like it's separate from being eye to eye with your own peers. I was anticipating this grand, sweeping, like, Egypt plague level, like, rejection to happen socially. And what actually happened when I allowed God to lead me spiritually and I prayed about my fear and just the trauma that I was anticipating in that process, I have the strongest convictions to reach out to some of the people who I had been the closest to. And when I did, when I finally stepped into my own authenticity, because that's something like any individuality is extremely discouraged in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Like, cults don't get to be perpetuated by people who know themselves. It just doesn't work like that. And I say cults because there's a cult mentality in the church. Whether or not you want to call it a cult, it doesn't matter to me. I know the mentality is there for a lot of people. And the way that operates is that everybody takes on a collective identity, and it's really discouraging that you have your own. So it's like Kara was saying previously, the capacity for you to see yourself for who you are and to accept yourself is discouraged. Part of this process of being able to maintain authentic community is, I would say, first, because there are some people who will hurt you, and they will hurt you because they are hurt or they are hurtful. Like, they've got their own things going on, but if you step into that realm with them, you're going to experience what they're already doing to themselves because they're going to project it onto you, right? But really, in your spiritual walk, when you're cultivating this relationship with their creator who wants the best for you and wants you to enjoy your life, even if the people who claim to follow the creator don't, you will start to get guidance. And sometimes you won't even get like tangible guidance. Sometimes you'll pray about it, it'll manifest itself because God's just waiting for an opportunity to show you, actually, not only do I love you, but I have people in the corners of your life that really love you too. And I want you all to come together and grow, towards me with each other. When I accepted that invitation spiritually and allowed myself to be vulnerable with some of these people who I valued the most and was also the most terrified to lose, lo and behold, I find out they're struggling with the same things I am. And I never would have known. I never would have known unless I had been able to be vulnerable long enough and be authentic long enough to go, you know what? This could result in great pain, me stepping out and being honest and telling this person the truth about how I feel, but I'm going to come to them in a spirit of desire, something else that we're discouraged from showing at all, especially as women in the church. Like, come to you in the spirit of desiring to maintain a relationship with this person and telling them, you know, I don't know where you are spiritually. I don't know where your intention. I am going through whatever, you know, to whatever extent that you feel led to share with them where your journey is, and then concentrate on, I'm telling you this because I don't want my walk to threaten my connection with you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want my growth to interfere with the intimacy that I think we have as two people who see each other as loved ones. And I'm not talking about romance in the slightest right now, but I am using this terminology because also, unfortunately, women are so objectified in the church that we're not even allowed to conceptualize having intimate relationships outside of people who use us for sex. So it's really important. It's really important for us to start thinking about love in its wholeness, and that if there are people around us with whom we desire to maintain community, that the church doesn't have anything to do with that. And sometimes just putting that out there into the atmosphere, just introducing that to the other person, whether they thought about it or not, there's very few people, especially if they care about you even a little tiny bit, who won't respond to the vulnerability of going, hey, dude, you know, we're probably in different places with this. I really don't know, you know, and also telling them it may not matter to you. Because for my friends, I didn't necessarily care if they were going to stay super conservative, as long as that didn't include badgering and bullying me. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you believe what you believe. I don't intend to interfere with that, because I would never come between you and your relationship with God. But I need to tell you that as I take a different path towards my own salvation, I still want to hold your hand. You know what I'm saying? Like, I still want to reach across. I still want to be able to text you and tell you happy birthday and understand that I genuinely care and that I am excited that you made it another year. I want to be able to, when we see each other at a mutual friend's house, sit down and talk about what's going on in your life and your job with your kids. And in spite of the fact that you didn't go to the movies last night, and maybe I did watch a movie at home, that you still understand that I care about the fact that your boss is harassing you, you know. Just to cultivate this collective intimacy, to spend time concentrating on the fact that caring about other people is your goal. I've there were some people who surprised me, and that my going in a different path was so terrifying to them that it threatened where they felt like they were at the time. And you do have to prepare yourself for that. But the reality is, if you're trying to have authentic community, then you need to have the people identified who don't want to have it with you. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's also part of not just your spiritual walk, but just being an adult. Like, why would you want people around you who are hell-bent on backstabbing you? And maybe you didn't know about it yesterday, but you should probably find out today, right? So, like, my encouragement for that is that the likelihood that your community is still going to be there for you is very high. We have to decenter, you know, religion as a structure, with the concept of thinking that that's where the community is. That's not where the community is. You know what I'm saying? The community is in identifying and intentionally continuing connections with people that you care about, that you have mutual experiences with, even if those experiences took you in different directions. So I guess what I'm saying is that I think we feel the need, like, once we separate from the religion, we have to separate from the community. Let me tell you something. Once I was able to have those conversations with those people, my community, my capacity to commune with the people who I was raised with in Seventh-day Adventism has actually been so much higher. I mean, the only reason why I know Car at all is because of this fact, right? Like, we met through, we are not SDA, but we met through people who still are. You hear me? So it's like, and they're probably still going to be. And Cara and I are okay with that. Like, they fully know who we are and where we are and whatever. We still talk to each other. I've made other friends who were still Seventh-day Adventists who knew my other SDA friends, and they're still going to do what they're going to do. You know what I mean? Like, on their path with God. But I think we give religion too much credit. We give religion too much credit and too much power over our identities and our relationships. And once we can release the hold mentally that we think that it has in controlling who we can interact with and how, and just start concentrating on being authentic and direct with that person, you might actually find, like just like the Sabbath, that it gets even better. So I think for everybody to think about that, even the women who were on this, like the only reason why we met each other was the same thing. Like I met y'all through SDA people who were still, recovering from church yesterday. But yeah, I still talk to my SDA friends. I will say that our parents, and that's, you can have a whole different conversation about that, but I've definitely had my parents' friends like express some distress because they perceive that I'm like the renegade that's like pulling the kids out of church, you know what I'm saying? Like there's this tug of war and I'm on the other end just collecting people for my team. But I don't do that at all. And everybody who's my friend who knows that, I don't care. Like that sounds really mean, but I don't. I think there's plenty of people who are Seventh-day Adventists who are going to go to heaven. But I also think that there's Buddhists who are going to go to heaven. And I also think that there's Jews who are going to go to heaven. You hear me? Like when God said, I have sheep in every fold, and if it weren't so, I wouldn't have told you. And like the Aramaic communicates that he was real pissed off that they were asking him this, probably again. Like I personally took that very seriously. So it's not pressing me if you're still SDA and you go to church. Like I'm more concerned about what do you do after church? Are we feeding the homeless together? That's what I want to know. I don't care what you did this morning. Are we going to that shelter to drop off these clothes? Like I don't care if you were at the Buddhist temple yesterday. It don't matter to me at all. Are we in service to the community? Because if we are in service to the community, then I can walk with you. And I think once we decentralize religion from that, we really get into a very unified, really incredible pathway to be in community with a lot of people. I don't know. That's my contribution. That's my ending contribution before I go.
No, thank you for that, Leah. And I just wanted to quickly say that because I'm hosting this on my church's platform, it's the One Rule Church, and the whole idea behind it is that I don't know that there's much that we can all objectively unify around. Leah's saying goodbye. So we will see her next week because we're gonna have to cut
She's
this
in
off.
London,
Thank you
guys.
so much.
So I
I'll
just
be
wanted to,
back.
before she said
Bless
goodbye,
all of you. I'll watch the recording, okay?
I just
Bye.
wanted to say thank her for being here because it's very late there.
Yes.
And she's taking time out. So I just
Yes.
wanted to make sure that we highlight that.
It's almost midnight. Yes, I'm a little tired.
Yes.
That's why I was making
Thank
this
you.
video. You can't see how sleep I am right now. I love you guys.
We appreciate you so much. But yes, the short version is I don't know that there's much that we can all objectively unify ourselves under. Because even within Christendom or specific denominations, you have a bunch of people who don't agree on everything. And so and that causes problems because there's each ideology has its set of beliefs, and there's people who feel like you should follow all of those things to a T. There's people who feels like you can take or leave some of it or whatever, and there is no consensus. And it's problematic that there is no consensus. Whereas I think community built around the premise that there doesn't have to be a consensus. And if we can find community around the things that Leah was talking about, not our belief so much as our humanity, and that need for connection, that need for fellowship, that need for love, and recognizing everybody needs it, and their beliefs should not be a barrier to them being able to access that if they're looking to do it and do it genuinely and respectfully. We should be able to have spaces where people can come in and share a variety of ideas. And I think that if you cannot hold space with people who believe differently from you without feeling insecure about where you stand in your beliefs, then that means that you're not strong enough in your beliefs. And if anything, I would think that you would want to be strengthened in your beliefs so that you don't feel insecure when you get challenged. And so the purpose or my goal with our church, and everyone in my family and in our congregation has different things that they want to accomplish, all admirable, helping the homeless, all of that stuff. But for me, ideologically, I want to give people not a set belief system, but a series of tools that they can use to figure out what they believe for themselves and to be able to find confidence in that so that they can feel one comfortable sharing and sharing thoughtfully and with some level of education and whatever else. But then also so that they can hear other perspectives and not feel threatened by it and not get disrespectful and not need everybody to agree and be draw the same conclusions to feel comfortable in where they're at. And I don't believe that organized religion holistically, this is denominationally Christendom as a whole, I don't believe that it's designed to give people the tools to do that. I think it's designed to keep you insecure so that you allow your conscience to be dictated by the people around you as opposed to your focus being on God. I don't believe Christianity or any denomination within it was designed for anything other than control. And I think it's like, me being younger and my mom, trying to tell me what to do and, whatever else, giving me advice. And I'm like, I got to listen to my mom. I got to listen to my mom. But at some point I had to grow up and be an adult. My mom doesn't live with me. She can't be here every second of the day to tell me what I should and should not do. And I have to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. And if your religion is not encouraging you to be able to do that, and not just by surrounding yourself with people who all agree with you, but surrounding yourself with, you can be around anybody at any point and have an educated conversation, not just about your beliefs, but other people's beliefs. I can sit down with an agnostic, atheist, whoever else, and I fully understand where they're coming from and why. And it's not a threat. It's not a threat to me and my belief in God. It doesn't make me feel any kind of way. And if they have a valid point, I can acknowledge their valid point and still believe in God at the end of the day. And I feel like that's how it should be. So in summary, to answer the question, I think that community is supposed to be about our humanity as opposed to strictly being based on our ideology. And I don't think ideology should be a barrier to community. And I don't think that people should feel pressured to be or do something within the context of community that does not feel right to them. Like at my church, we don't take offering. We don't force people to do or be like participate in the service, whatever else, do anything that they don't want to do. And what has happened is that people who, like my older brother, he didn't even go to our church when it was Adventist. And one of our Adventist members who was there, weekly, religiously, like I hadn't heard him really participate or doing anything. And they both volunteered to, take on certain things and be a part. And I feel like that is how it should be. And I feel like when the community aspect is healthy and it's safe and it's uplifting, people want to do what they can to share that. When you're filling people up with God's love and who God is, I think that the product of that is them wanting to share that love with others. And I think Ashley, Cherie, Lee, I feel like a bunch of people said that, but I think that should be the product. And I don't think you should have to force anybody to be involved or guilt trip them or shame them into, being involved. I feel like when it's like having a friendship, when you're friends with someone, you want to hang out with them. You want to talk to them and, do stuff with them or whatever. And it's not like you call your friends because you want to call them. Like it's not like pulling teeth. And so I feel like the same should be true for church. If you give people just room to be and to journey, they will be able to tap into their beliefs or tap into the Spirit of God that is being, given to them, and they'll want to give that to other people and contribute that to the community itself as well. But we've been on for a long time. There are more questions that we wanted to answer, just with regard to what our spiritual lives look like now, and what we do on a day-to-day basis to stay close to God, and to stay connected within our respective communities, and what has not worked for us in that process. But I think that's probably better suited for its own conversation. And so I'm the consensus, I think, is that we're actually going to do this again next week. Yeah. Okay, so we will be back next week for part 2 and to talk about that. I see Cherie wants to say something.
I would encourage anybody that is listening, whether it is now or in the replay, if there anything else that you would like for us to discuss, please send an email or a message to Cara, because I think I could be speaking for everybody, but I'm sure everyone's on the same wavelength as me. We would like for this to be more of a dialogue. And if there are things, because sometimes we don't think about things, if there are things in particular that you would like to know, please. There was a young gentleman from YouTube, I think his name was Brian, who asked me a question earlier. I appreciate that, because sometimes you don't think about it when you're doing something day to day. You don't even think that to bring it up. So if there's something that you would like for us to discuss next time, please reach out to Cara so that way she can assemble it for us so that we can just talk about it.
Right. Exactly that. Definitely what Cherie said. And also, so the plan is to not just discuss on live. The plan is to have a clubhouse room at least once a month. But again, if interest is there and people need or want more than that, by all means, I'm open to doing that. And finding a way, I guess, I think Facebook Messenger has rooms or something like that. So finding a way for people who don't have access to Clubhouse because they don't have iPhones.
Also, I would recommend, I would also recommend doing a podcast.
Yes. So the goal was to record these conversations and release them as a podcast, but I wasn't able to record this one. I couldn't figure it out in time. So hopefully I'll be able to figure that out for next week, and then we'll just start releasing these as a podcast. So yeah, there's going to be a ton of ways to, these are all going to be you can watch them back on the church's Facebook channel, on the church's Facebook page, the One World Church YouTube channel, and my personal YouTube channel, Cara M. Young. We'll be working on figuring out the podcast situation. We'll be doing Clubhouse meetups at least once a month, just for fellowship and community, for like-minded individuals to come together and have conversations about, whatever people feel is on their heart to talk about. If anyone wants to, start up doing studies or, exploring different religions, I would actually be super interested to hear from Ashley about some of what she has learned from Judaism and stuff like that. Yeah. So definitely
Especially the holy days.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that.
Because I don't know really anything. I don't know very much about it. So being able to, just share our knowledge and come together, fellowship, talk about things that are happening in the world and how it relates to our spirituality, answering any questions that people may have. But I just feel like what the feedback that I have gotten is that community is needed for people who are either outside of church or would be stepping away from things that are not serving them if they had somewhere to go. And so the purpose of having these discussions in panel format is to let you know that you're not alone, but then also to bring in people so that we can have, right now, because of COVID and the fact that we're all scattered to the far winds of the country, to have, if not an in-person community or virtual community that people can, come together with, because I need that. I feel like everybody on this panel has expressed needing that. And so, yeah, if that is you and that speaks to you and that's what you're looking for, that's what you need, then we're here to meet that need. So if you guys want to say something before we go, you can.
I enjoyed my time with you ladies today, so I can't wait for next week. I thoroughly enjoyed you all.
And we enjoyed you, girl.
Same,
Both of y'all. Y'all were
same.
preaching.
I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm excited. And I just want to say thank you to everybody in the comment section. And if there was anything that was directed towards me directly, I'll get to it afterwards. I'm not versed enough to multitask like that. So forgive me, but I'll get to it. But thank you to everyone. And thank you, Cara, for having me.
Oh, yes. I'm so thankful to both of you guys and to Chanel and Leah for just being willing to participate and give us your time and your knowledge. I know that all of y'all are smart and have, really good feedback and things to say. So I'm just glad to be able to provide a platform for you to share it with the people who need to hear it. And I want to shout out Miss Audrey from my church. She is also a former coworker of my dad. She has been all through the thread, just providing her encouragement and being uplifting. And that is always how she is. Reasons why I could never walk away from my church family, my Natha family, because our old church was called Maranatha, but my One World Church family too. Like, I love them absolutely to death, and it's because of stuff like that. Like, they've been nothing but supportive and encouraging throughout all of it. So I'm, just thankful for her for listening in and, being encouraging to everyone on the panel. And so, yeah, I think we are going to end the broadcast, but we will be back here next week, same time, to get into part 2 and share what our spiritual lives look like now, to answer questions, and to give you guys some tips on figuring out what your spirituality looks like for you. So yeah, thank y'all for listening, and we'll see you next week. Bye.